Well, if you're listening to us on Monday, April 22nd, today is Earth Day, which you may not know, but was started way back in 1970. So that's what we're going to be talking a lot about today is around sustainability. I want to give you a little bit of context on this, on the history of Earth Day. I think it's super fascinating. There was a massive oil spill back in the day in California, and that drove a junior senator from Wisconsin, to build a huge protest with only 85 staff members, and it had 20 million people across the country step out into the streets, parks, and auditoriums to demonstrate against over 150 years of industrial impact that has left a growing legacy of serious human health impacts. We're talking 10% of the entire population of the US at that time. And that was what really launched Earth Day in 1970. And it achieved a really rare political feat where it enlisted support from Republicans and Democrats, the rich, the poor, businesses, and labor leaders. And the very first Earth Day led to the creation of the US Environmental Protection Agency and the passage of the first environmental law. So today's a big day, guys. And in the theme for Earth Day, we're going to be diving into the evolving landscape of eco-conscious branding and marketing. We're going to explore how companies across various industries are integrating sustainability into their brand identity, different products and marketing strategies that have come out from that, and how it's becoming a powerful tool to win customers and boost brand loyalty, but it may not be working for all brands. And we're going to talk more about that too. Let's get into it. You guys ready?
Let's do it.
Men go mad.
He's gone mad.
Mad men.
You're mad.
The man's mad.
Mad men.
I'm mad.
All right. So I'll start off with the first one. And this segment is going to be talking about brands that have sustainability deeply ingrained in the DNA. And the brand that I chose to talk about is Patagonia, the outdoor clothing company and gear equipment manufacturer. The brand is synonymous with environmental activism, corporate responsibility, and it's deeply embedded sustainability into its business model, not just marketing strategy. Patagonia was born from a desire to create durable, reliable gear that does not harm the environment. Let's get into their sustainability practices a bit. They prioritize the use of organic and recycled materials. So it's that understanding that consumers who love the outdoors will pay a premium to protect it. They were the first major outdoor clothing company to offer fair trade certified products. And this means that the workers making those products earn fair wages and work in safe working conditions. And that can be a huge differentiator, especially in clothing. Then they also pledge 1% of its sales to the preservation and restoration of the natural environment. And since 1985, they have awarded over $140 million in domestic and international environmental groups. This is how dedicated this brand is to saving the environment. Its founder and primary stakeholder, Yvon Chouinard, had his family transferred their entire ownership of Patagonia last year. We're talking $3 billion in equity to a specially designed trust and a nonprofit organization that will be focusing on combating climate change and protecting undeveloped land around the world. That means that profits will be distributed out to this nonprofit organization to do good in the world, not to some big rich person or family who gets to reap the benefits of this. There's so many examples of how Patagonia really brings sustainability deep in its DNA. And I think they've really taught a masterclass on how to be sustainable and be a brand that is likable. They talk a lot about capitalism potentially being the enemy, but they have a really unique approach that it doesn't have to be capitalistic or environmentally friendly and sustainable, that those can coexist. And I think we've seen what Patagonia has become today because of its position on sustainability. It's a leader in outdoor sports and gear, and it's just a really awesome brand to be a fan of, especially the founder's family, who they started this whole company because they liked hiking, and they just wanted to offer better, more sustainable products with better wages and better working conditions for its employees. And they've really doubled down on it, and it's paying off. So that's my highlight. And I think Patagonia is the best in class example of a sustainable brand.
No, Samir, I think you're right on, right? I think Patagonia, I mean, we talk a lot about this on the show about authenticity this is the core of their business, right? This is, hey, this is a passion project that turned into a huge billion-dollar business, and they are core to their, authenticity about being sustainable and being part of the outdoors, and not just doing outdoor activities like some of its competitors do, but being part of the outdoors organically. And they showcase that by both the brand and the company, but also the individuals that lead the brand and the company, which you can see from the trust donation. So yeah, the best way to start off with Earth Day is to showcase a brand that breathes Earth Day.
My favorite campaign of theirs was where they said, "Don't buy this jacket." And I don't know if you guys recall that one, but they did a print ad. It showed a beautiful jacket, and they said, "Don't buy this," and really to show that like we don't want to mass produce things, we don't want to mass sell things. Buy it if you absolutely need it, and then you hold it for a long time. So their worn wear program is awesome. Love it. So that I'm excited to share, on the note of fashion. I don't know if many of the listeners know, my background is actually in architecture and construction. So that's what I paid A&M for that nice paper on my wall. So I studied architecture and construction. I have a background in like lead architecture and lead design, which is all sustainability. And so I got the whole spiel from a lot of different companies out there about like different materials and things that they use. But now today I sell women's clothes. And so this one company, this French company really speaks to me. It's called Fab Brick, FAB, like fabulous brick. So what they do is they take unwanted, thrown away clothes and they break them down and they make them into bricks. Now, it's not the type of bricks that you'd put on the outside of your building, but it is a brick that you could use on an interior facade. It's really good for paneling inside of a building and stuff, really to create a statement. Their Instagram is popping. It's like they get tons of engagement. And what's really unique about this is like designers who do have a lead background, they now have a really cool material to use. Because usually when I was studying and stuff, the materials that we'd have to kind of incorporate for lead design was, or like green architecture was all really boring, like natural woods and things like that. And it just like stainless steels and like, it was just all, there's no color really ever. This is a really cool alternative. And what they even do is like the people at Fab Brick, they'll look at your inspo boards on what kind of things that you want to design for your home. Let's say, and they'll look at the colors and your furniture and this and that, and they'll actually handpick the fabrics that they're going to cut down and then create bricks for you accordingly. So I loved everything that they were showing. I'm probably going to use this product whenever I'm redesigning a house or doing something cool. But Salim, you just bought some furniture. You should check this thing out.
Furniture buying is a tough gig. So for the point of this conversation, I have not bought furniture yet, because every time we go, we're like, no, we don't like this. Or, we've seen the evolution of furniture. I know we're going to sidetrack a little bit, but we've seen the evolution of furniture lately. And like, I've got this table downstairs and it's like sturdy. And my wife keeps looking at these, like, we've got a restoration hardware. We've gone to the best of the best, and we've gone to the natural ones. And it's just, nothing is like the same quality anymore. So quality's just dived, and I'm gonna go check these guys out and see if there's some value here. But no, thanks for bringing that up, man. I'm in.
Yeah, that piece about like helping you with your design choices, I feel like that's a really clever way to find kind of inserting yourself into those moments, right? Like I think there's so many kind of recyclable material companies out there, right? Like you can find different types of products that you can use, but no one will point to you and give you the solution about how it's supposed to be used best. So really good call on that angle for that for Fab Brick to offer that consultancy kind of design approach and finding the right way to plug in their brand into it. Very cool.
So of course I'm going to talk tech on sustainability, and most people might think tech is not sustainable, even though they say it really loudly. But I don't know how many people know that the Dow Jones actually has a sustainability index that measures companies based on their environmental, social, and economic performance. Actually, you can invest in that group, in that that stock index. It's DJSI for anybody that's interested. Again, we don't provide financial advice here, but surprisingly enough, out of the top 10 contributors to that, tech makes up more than half, including companies like Microsoft and Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, and lead the pack. But includes companies like Salesforce and Adobe and semiconductor manufacturers ASML. Look, I think when people think tech companies, they think big data centers, a lot of electricity and a lot of blinky lights and all the power that gets consumed through it. But it, they're counterproductive in that, and I think Microsoft is probably the best example of that. Microsoft, in their sustainability report recently, said that 100% of their energy utilized from are renewable sources out of their big facilities that they have, right? The big data centers, one in Texas, the Redstone office. In addition to that, they removed about 1.4 million metric tons of carbon dioxide through their program this past year, and about 15.6 meters of cubic meters of replenishment of water around the world, right? So replenishing the water systems and making sure that it doesn't just get drained and absorbed. And as I mentioned earlier about their facilities, but in addition to just being 100% renewable energy, 8 of their facilities, including their data centers, are zero waste certified. So they're not wasting anything either. So as much as they're absorbing the environment, Microsoft has a real big focus, and a lot of tech companies do, to be, give back to the community, because they are leading the pack in revenue and in numbers, and they're saying, hey, look, it's the only right thing to do is to give back to the environment that they're absorbing from. So tech is always in there.
I had a question for you, Salim. I got an email from my company revolving around Earth Day about teaching us as employees how to reduce our digital carbon footprint. And it was about being more efficient and how we use our technology. Can you help me understand what that means? Because I think I really struggle with like understanding how something digital cannot be sustainable. What does that mean? I didn't look more into it when my company emailed me. What can you tell me about that?
There's different variations of that, right? I think there's like being more conscious about your digital footprint is also about the absorbance, right? If your gear is always on, is a very simple example. A lot of us don't ever turn our laptops off or networks off, and some more new computers have the ability to store less power or compute less power, but just having things plugged in absorbs energy. And that's part of it, right? That's probably the easiest and simplest way to convert that over, to say, hey, look, let's consume less energy. And it may make a small tick, but it is if you keep adding small ticks, it'll absorb. But the other opposite is, hey, are you printing paper or all that stuff? I think that's also important. Like, hey, are you taking digital content and printing it? We do a lot of print here because it's just old manual stuff. But that consuming data across the channels, right? Even if you look at just where your content is stored, and how much of it is stored in the cloud, right? So the cloud, as everybody loves to say, hey, we're going to go move this to the cloud or drop this in Box. And the more, even if it's free or if it's something, reasonably priced, it's consuming data from somewhere else, right? If it's sitting on AWS has got to, energize up data centers and networks to go and make sure that product stays there and is efficient. That's why you're seeing a lot of companies today in our clientels saying, hey, look, we don't want to go to we kind of want to bring stuff back from the cloud, because A, cloud's getting expensive, but B, we can't control the environmental aspects of it, right? So when we have to go report back to my Dow Jones statement, right? When I have to go back to the S&P and the Dow Jones and say, hey, look, here's my sustainability report, I don't have control over what AWS is consuming. I don't have control over what Azure is consuming. So if I own the data center myself, then I can go say, hey, look, I can, do 100% renewable energy. Or I can do less power performing, or I can buy, compute at a efficiency rate, right? So one of our products that we just had this with a demo with the customer is switching out their network gear. And the only reason why you would switch out the network gear is it basically cut the power usage by 70%. So now their data centers are billing less, right? So even though it might cost a little bit more in the initial to buy the hardware, but over time, the power that it's going to consume is going to make their bill come down. And the same thing in that case. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, no, good point. Good examples too. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, we always saw carbon footprint. We didn't, we learned about that a lot, but digital footprint is, kind of a last 10 years thing that has been discussed. But I thanks for breaking that down, Salim.
All right, let's get into our next segment. We're talking about sustainability, but it's not just about environment and protecting the earth. I think the definition of sustainability has definitely expanded to include the protection of Earth's people. So let's get into social sustainability and talk about some brands who kick ass at being socially sustainable. I'll start us off with my favorite, Ben & Jerry's. Not only famous for chunk-filled ice creams, but also its deep-rooted commitment to social justice. It is deeply woven into the fabric of the company's identity. which is definitely paying off in brand loyalty, and it has produced a massive cult following. Ben & Jerry's has been vocal in support for racial justice, especially following the tragic events leading to the Black Lives Matter movement. They have launched a line with in line. They have innovated in line with their products and have even created products and renamed them, where those sales are donated to support advocacy groups. One of them being the LGBTQ plus community, where since 1989, Ben & Jerry's was one of the first major employers to offer health insurance to domestic partners of employees, and that included same-sex couples. We're talking 1989 when we look at who is really pioneering the push for LGBTQ rights and equality. They've celebrated marriage equality by renaming flavors such as I Do, when the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage nationwide. I wanted to ask, why does this approach work? Yes, I do believe Ben & Jerry's is fighting an honest fight by doubling down on social justice, but Ben & Jerry's has a unique brand named after real people who have real names. And I think that's what makes Ben & Jerry's feel so much more human. We've talked about in the past what brands should act like as if they were human, and what are things that they should do, especially if they were human. And Ben & Jerry's is damn close to being a real human being, deeply into the name. And as a result, is a human brand that looks after humans. And now when we talk about all the different ways of being sustainable or finding different opportunities to connect with your audiences, I think this is one example of a brand that stayed true to who they are and found a space that they could believe in, that they could really own, right? Like I think even Patagonia as an example, where they focusing on outdoor apparel and they are fully ingrained into the environment and protecting the outdoors, right? Like it seems so authentic, Salim, to your point. And Ben & Jerry is just one of those few brands out there that's named after people that you can almost feel like you can put a face to Mr. Ben and Mr. Jerry. And so it's no surprise that they are on this side of fighting for social justice and protecting people and being human. So that's my highlight. I'm a big fan of what Ben & Jerry's does, especially in social sustainability.
I'm not sure, like, because you guys know my take on this is like when you go that far in on something that's polarizing, a little scary. But Ben & Jerry's, I don't think is trying to do it for profits or do it for, oh, we want to be loved by everyone. They understand they're going to be hated by some people and they're okay with that. Bud Light, on the other hand, didn't really take that into consideration. They were still trying to keep their, Southern roots customer, but also say, hey, let's go sponsor some activists on the LGBTQ side. So it doesn't seem authentic. I think Ben Jerry's keeps it authentic, and they totally understand the collateral damage of doing that, and they don't care, which then makes you kind of want them more. So I kind of like that. I see that you're right. We've talked about this so many times, and Ben & Jerry's is actually a great example of how it should be done the right way, of showing real authentic takes on your brand.
It's the idea of humanizing it, right? I think that it's part of their DNA, and it's, most recently I did a Girl Scout training or something the other day, and I learned a new thing, which was DE&IB, which is the belonging portion. The B is the belonging, and I think that's what Ben & Jerry's provides, right? I think it's an idea of, hey, they belong to this group. It's not like, hey, they kind of squeezed into that group and try to outline it, but they belonged in it at the beginning, and this is part of their DNA, and they're not doing it loudly and screaming out like, hey, look at me. This is like, hey, no, this is norm. You need to be part of this conversation as a normal conversation, and not trying to say, hey, look at me now. It's just saying, hey, look, let's be reasonable. Let's be real. Let's be people. And have a people type of discussion. And that's what they're really good at.
So when it comes to social sustainability, we couldn't really talk about it without talking about Legos. So I don't know if you guys know, 25% of Legos Corporation is actually owned by the Legos Foundation. And the Legos Foundation has a very simple philosophy of learning through play, which is really cool. I'm a father of two, and we have Legos at home and whatnot. And so many discoveries are made subconsciously while playing with Legos. And so rather than just throwing a bunch of blocks at kids and just saying, hey, we sell toys, they really emphasize the philosophy of learning through play. It's a Denmark company. They, there's everything has to have a little bit of meaning when you talk about the Nordic countries, but they focus on STEAM skills, right? So they've started to incorporate robotics, and obviously engineering has always been there, but coding and all sorts of augmented reality and everything as part of Legos and their product offerings. What's cool is, and what really stood out to me was how they make sure that this is not just for the privileged. They definitely donate Legos all over the country to underprivileged communities and countries like that, but they want to make sure that this is an opportunity for all kids. That spoke to my heart. I loved reading that when I was doing some research on this. And really going full circle, this creates community. So the kids that play with Legos grow up and become Lego adults. So you see those elaborate statues and elaborate things that a lot of the grown kids at heart do is with Legos. So really got me thinking, though, this is kind of like subconscious branding. We see it in not subconscious, subliminal branding. You see it with Red Bull too, right? So they will send a guy to space. They will do dance competitions. They have an F1 racing team. They do, different boating races and things like that. Has nothing to do with energy drinks, but has everything to do with living life, right? And going to an extreme. So, I saw that with Legos, and I think Legos doing it the way they have, no one's really been able to take a chunk out of their pie. There's all sorts of toys out there for kids, but Legos will always be Legos. So I think Legos has done a fantastic job of social responsibility.
I like to call that like big picture branding, right? With the example that you gave with Red Bull and then Lego, like Lego's been around for like 100 years by now. The only way that they're able to do that is because they are thinking big picture about what kind of foundation that they are setting kids up for the future, and they continue to become advocates for that brand, right? Just like you said, you even having an engineering background, I'm sure as hell Legos played a part of your kind of activities and what made you want to get into there, and now you're sharing that down to the next generation, right? So it's big picture, right? Like Red Bull is the same. It's been known the same to be the same type of brand, that high intensity, super interesting, right? Like you're never gonna fall asleep on Red Bull. And then of course, like tying it back to the product too, right? I think there's so much benefit that comes from thinking about big picture, and you're not just marketing for the next season, but you're marketing for the next generation. And I think Lego has really mastered that.
My Legos has become more of even a noun now. So I think my favorite part about Legos as a brand is just that they've become a noun, right? Even if you look at blocks, regardless if they're actually Legos or not, you're going to call it Legos. And there's no better branding than that. So they've done a really good job, both looking at the future generations and generations to come. Well, when I think social impact, the company that comes to my mind is Airbnb. And I know you're like, hey, yeah, I get it. They're they use real estate property that's existing, but that's not why. Their social impact stands out way bigger than that. Bigger than they're in the most bigger cities. Like you usually you go to hotels in these big cities, but they've opened up a whole new canvas of places around the world that didn't have good hotels or didn't have a good residential perspective to go showcase that community. And I think that's the big picture here for Airbnb from a social impact standpoint is they really opened up unique locations for people to access easily, where it was inconvenient for most parts, right? They've brought that opportunity to support local communities in those areas where we wouldn't be, promote tourism, promote culture understanding, and the idea of just being able to go and it's like a foreign exchange program without being able to see who's there, right? It's like it's a very unique way of being diverse, understanding other people around the world, and being so like inclusive, right? Nobody cares what background you came from when you're renting Airbnb. That's not a way of you filtering that thing accordingly, but it provides the idea of just being inclusive. Hey, share my home, share my place. I'm here for you. If you need anything, you can text, message, and the service levels are always great. So I think from a social impact standpoint, Airbnb has done a good job of just encouraging just being global and being connected as a human in multiple channels.
Yeah, I feel like I see Airbnb do a lot of good in the world. They're the largest hotel chain in the world. And their properties are not assets, they're resources. And I think they have really found the right way to utilize those resources to do good in the world. And you're spot on. And I think like they have the privilege of being in these pockets of different parts of the world where they know that they can drive a real big impact and they can drive real change. And kudos to them for understanding that those properties and those hosts can be more than just revenue generators for them, but they can be access, they can be resources, they can connect to communities, and good to them. Good to them for finding that out early and doing it really well. All right, I will take us into the next segment. This one's going to be a little bit fun. We talked about brands who do it really well. Let's talk about brands who don't. This one you're going to see a lot in branding and marketing, right? You're going to see a lot of brands get called out for attempting to be authentic or trying to be sustainable. But the fact of the matter is that they really aren't. My brand to highlight here is Amazon, the largest and most influential global corporation who has faced significant criticism for its sustainability practices. Now, there's a lot of sides to Amazon. I'm going to be looking at the logistics network side of it. So that includes the air and ground transportation, which results in a massive carbon footprint, as you can imagine. But Amazon announced a commitment to reach carbon neutrality by 2040. Let me explain what carbon neutral means. It's when brands say they want to be carbon neutral, that means they must offset their carbon emission creation by renewable energy investment. So they don't necessarily reduce their carbon footprint, they just pay money to offset it with environmentally safe initiatives. So anytime you see a brand talk about being carbon neutral, understand what that means. That it's not that they're doing less bad. They are trying to do more good in other ways to get credit for being neutral. Now, the eye-opening part of this is that an Accenture report from 2022 says that while 34% of the world's largest companies are committed to being net zero, 93% of them will fail to hit their target unless they at least double the pace of emission reduction by 2030. So what I'm saying is that a bunch of empty promises are being made around this carbon neutrality. Amazon lied. And since they have made their pledge 4 years ago, their emissions have actually risen by 40%. And in 2022 alone, they created 208 million pounds of plastic waste from its packaging, which is enough trash to circle the earth more than 200 times in the form of plastic air pillows. I want you guys to think about this next time you shop Amazon. People buy energy efficient and eco-friendly products on Amazon thinking that they're doing good for the world, but they don't factor in the environmental impact of buying that on Amazon. And I think there's a big hypocrisy there that all of us, I think, are too naive to understand. But for those of us who feel like we are eco-friendly, I think we have to capture the entire footprint of what our decisions make and capture not just buying that little renewable power generator on Amazon and then getting it shipped to you in 2 days, but know what impact you really made with that purchase on Amazon. So think twice about carbon neutral.
My MBA school, we did a case study, and I remember the story, and then I did a report on it. It was JP Morgan recently acquired like 250,000 acres under their asset management company, which was probably worth about $500 million. And the only reason why they bought it was so they could sell it to offset other companies' carbon offset. So it was a business move. That's what we talked about. It was a business move that utilized the current campaigns. And there's a better example of greenwashing than figuring out how can I offset this by just buying green land.
Nasty game that corporations get to play in the topic of sustainability, just to get that little badge on their packaging to give them credit. The kinds of things that they can do, maybe what kind of accounting moves that can be made. It's really fun.
I was gonna kind of go back to the fashion part of this segment because you can't really talk about failed greenwashing or failed sustainable pitching and greenwashing without talking about H&M. So in 2011, H&M started this collection, or they launched a collection called the Conscious Collection. And I mean, totally like great branding on this collection, right? So they were touting sustainable materials like organic cotton and recycled polyester. Here was the problem though. It made up less than 2% of their whole collection of the pieces they were going to design that year. It's so really nothing is saving the planet at that point, right? Like of anything that they're doing. So this was completely, but bashed by everyone. And I know H&M has done a bunch of different things like recycle your denim and this and that. But really, ultimately, I got to say that if you're shopping at H&M, you really do not care about the planet. If you're shopping at Zara, you really do not care about the planet. And here's why. Because being price conscious means that you are not earth conscious when it comes to fashion. I have fast fashion brand. And primarily you'll find my pieces for under $50 retail. And at that point I'm mass producing to make a profit. I can't focus on selling just a few pieces and having a good business. That's exactly what Zara and H&M and Cotton On and all these guys do. Gap, they try to mass produce, and then they're going to sell it to you at the cheapest price they can, and they know that's what majority of people care about. We did this fun survey with I call it fun, but we surveyed 200 of our customers, retail customers, and we asked them, do you actually care about sustainability? 90% said yes, we do. The follow-up question was, would you pay more for a sustainably made product? 76% said no, we would not. So this goes to tell you that this is not this is not something people actually want to pay for. They say they care about it, but really they care about how much money they have in their pockets at the end of the day.
No, here's my thought, and I'm going to go back to the H&M statement. Like, who makes this decision? Like, this is who at the board level or at the C-suite level says, hey, look, there's a gimmick here that if I throw 2% of this in, and we could call it X sustainable product and then sell it and it'll work well, right? Like, is that a CMO decision? Is that a bad CMO making a decision like that? Is that a CEO decision? Like, who I want to know who drives a conversation like that, because it's not, and H&M is a prime example of it, but it's not the only example that's out there, right? You see other companies do it, and watch. I guarantee it. If you're watching this on Earth Day on Monday, you're going to go through TikTok and Instagram Reels, and you're going to see all these people talk about greenwashing. It's just going to happen, and you're going to see all these fashion brands talk about, hey, BPA and all this other stuff. And I want to know who decides and says, hey, look, this is a good idea. This is a good marketing scheme, I call it, to greenwash and just see if we can get away with it.
I think it's that 1 month, maybe 2 months, where a target audience cares about the environment. And there's that one little consumer insight from the data team who said, oh, this is a big deal. We need to be talking about this. And then the CMO authorizes this kind of communication to go out. Probably works with someone in R&D in the H&M example to say, hey, let's just curate what we think is sustainably enough and put that into a curation and talk about how environmentally friendly we are. And it comes from the marketing insights side of things. And that's, I think, the repetitive pattern. The big problem with sustainable marketing is that it's always when it's convenient to the brand, and it's when consumers look like they start caring about it. To Adeel's point, people look like they care about it. It's because it becomes cool to talk about being sustainable or being responsible with your purchases. For that little moment of time, people are trying to be culturally relevant. Brands are trying to connect to that culture. And by the time stuff gets out, that moment has passed and everyone's back to being their own not sustainable self. So not to judge anyone out there. I'm not the most sustainable person in the world, but it happens. People think that it's cool to be sustainable for very little amount of time. And that's because it becomes cool to be like that. And then brands try to capitalize on it, and then it fails.
It's like using a paper straw in a plastic cup. I mean, you can't have both. Somehow you're just doing it to look cool at that point.
Well, we talk about eco fails and greenwashing, and being a car guy. The one that sticks out to me is Volkswagen's. Was it called #Dieselgate? Does anybody remember that? Or about that? How about that Volkswagen ad that had a Volkswagen car that said, "Look, we messed up." That was an ad. How else do you think somebody would do that? Well, they messed up bad. Back in 2015, Volkswagen was caught utilizing a device in its diesel cars to detect what an emissions test was occurring. So they detected when the emission test was going to happen, and they were able to calibrate to cheat the testing so that the EPG number would come out better. Well, the scandal not only cost them, once it broke out, they figured it out. Like, hey, look, we messed up, and yes, the EPG really didn't do what it said it was going to do, and the miles per gallon was consuming more carbon monoxide, and it was just a whole mess of things. The scandal not only cost them financially loss, because they did get fines of about $14.7 billion, but the trust was broken. And even just from a valuation standpoint, they dropped 33% just in 2 days, basically wiping out billions of valuation when the news broke out. Look, it causes, when you do this, and that's why I asked the question earlier, like, who makes the decision of saying, hey, look, who would incorporate something like this? This was different. This is not a CMO decision. This has to be a COO, CEO decision of operations, and the CEO did take responsibility, and he did step down right after this all broke out. But this is when you try to play the game and play the system a little bit, and you get caught.
Yeah, that's a good example of like a big consequence from some very poor decisions made to try to be eco-friendly. And especially in the auto space where you actually have so much opportunity to be eco-friendly. Like, I understand the investment that it takes and the logistics that it will have to happen in order for you to be more eco-friendly, but you actually can take credit for doing good in the world when you're in the auto category. Sucks to see it backfire like that. Awesome. Well, this was fun. We don't talk about sustainability enough because it tends to be kind of a boring blah topic, but I thought it was really relevant given the timing for Earth Day and the episode dropping right around here. So for all you guys out there, keep an eye out for brands that are doing really well. Call bullshit on the brands that don't, and just be more conscious about your decision and the choices that you make and the brands that you choose to purchase, because it does carry weight in the world. But with that, appreciate you guys tuning in. We're out.
Bye.
See you guys.
Men go mad.
He's gone mad.
Mad Men.
You're mad.
The man's mad.
Mad Men.
I'm mad.